the gun thing, that changed my life in an instant. And man, I followed that rabbit all the way down that damn hole. Like, I went and watched every possible, and I got lucky. I got lucky because this all happened during a time where YouTube was still the wild, wild west, where you can go and watch all types of gun content. And there were already people in the space who were big time. And I remember I watched every freaking video I could possibly watch on guns and firearms, read every magazine. I started going to every gun shop in the Houston area I could possibly go to. And I would spend hours there. It was a place of peace and calm for me, especially because during the time I was dealing with my own issues. There were things going on in my life that were really hard for me, and this was a beautiful escape. I think I watched so many gun videos that I really believe I got to the end of the gun tube side of YouTube. And it was at that point that I told myself, well, I think I might want to start making my own videos. This episode of the Colion Noir Podcast is brought to you by Vetter Holsters. Welcome to another episode of the Colion Noir Podcast. What I want to talk about today is I get questions sometimes, and when I look at comments sometimes, I see people kind of talk in a manner that makes it seem like I kind of just came out of nowhere. Like, I don't think I have a lot of people who follow me now who don't really know where my beginnings started and how I even got into this space and to where I'm at right now. And so I kind of want to tell that story. But then also I want to let you guys know that we do have some pretty intense guests and future podcasts coming up here. We're going to make some changes to the podcast here, get some expansion going on and all that good jazz. But for now, this is going to be another one of my solo podcasts for you guys where I talk to you and use you guys as my own therapy session. But no, really, honestly, what I really want to do is to provide context for the people that find me now, who follow me now. Because between when I started where I'm at now, like, I've had an insane amount of growth and so many new people following me, and they don't really know my background. So let's start with how I got into guns in the first place. So the way I got into guns was a good friend of mine. It was random. I didn't grow up with guns. I grew up in a very gun sterile environment. Didn't talk about guns. Guns weren't part of my perspective whatsoever up until I was about, I'd say about 19-ish, 20-ish, kind of in that range. And for all intents and purposes, I grew up in a way where guns were considered, it was the only people who carried them, the only people who had them were people who were engaging in some type of criminality. You were a criminal if you had a gun, or you were in a gang if you had a gun. You were doing something you weren't supposed to do if you had a gun. So for me, guns were not part of my upbringing. But then one day, my friend, a good friend of mine, he asked me if I wanted to go to the gun range. And I'd never been to the gun range at this point, ever. Only experience I had with guns was like seeing them on magazines. And he asked me, hey, do you want to go to the gun range? And I didn't want to, honestly. There was some level of curiosity there, but I didn't want to go because, again, guns were bad. I looked at guns the same way a lot of anti-gunners look at guns. I wasn't anti-gun, but they did kind of scare me, which is why I kind of have an ability to understand where a lot of other people come from when they are talking about firearms in a negative manner. And so I can kind of empathize a little bit from where their perspective is. All right, so I've got to give a quick shout out to Vetter Holsters. They're now sponsoring the podcast. I've been using their light tuck Kydex inside the waistband holster, and what I really like is how adjustable it is. You can tweak the ride height and cant to get it exactly how you want. Plus, they've got holsters for over 450 gun models in 75 different colors, so you can pretty much find whatever you need. But here's the thing that really sets them apart: their customer service. I've heard so many stories about how they've gone above and beyond to make sure you're happy with your holster, and with a lifetime warranty and a 30-day money-back guarantee, it's clear they stand behind their products. If you're in the market for a great holster, check them out at betterholsters.com. At the same time, I didn't want to look like a punk. I didn't want to look scary. I didn't want to look like a little bitch, essentially. So I said, yeah, let's go to the range. Had no idea what I was doing. Didn't know what I was getting myself into. So I remember we get to the gun range and I pull up, and it was in Houston, Texas, and it was at Top Shot. And we pull up and we get to the door, and I remember vividly, we get to the door and I open the door and I could immediately hear the guns going off. And it was that kind of muffled gunshot sound, because it's you had the door to go into the gun range, and then you also had the door to get into the actual firing lines. So the sound is kind of like muffled. So it's like a poof, poof, poof kind of sound. And I remember hearing that, and immediately I thought, dude, you're dumb. You just walked into a building where everybody has a gun. At any given point, somebody could just pull out a gun and shoot you and kill you just like that. Which is funny, because it's like that couldn't just happen anywhere out in the streets, just going about life in general. But when you know, there's something about knowing people have guns. When you're in that kind of fearful mind state of firearms, there's something about knowing when people have guns versus not knowing that makes you feel uncomfortable. Which is why a lot of people hate open carry, because they don't want to see even though they know in the back of their minds there are probably a ton of people carrying firearms, they don't want to see them, because then it validates it and confirms it in their mind, where they could see someone and think, well, they might not be carrying a gun, so they don't necessarily seem that dangerous, and it makes me feel all warm and fuzzy on the inside. But no, here I am at a gun range, it's going off, right? So I'm trying to keep my composure. I'm not gonna lie, I was scared. I was a little scared. I was outside of my comfort zone drastically. So I remember walking up to the counter, I'm filling out all the paperwork. They get us situated and squared away, and then we get in there and we go to the lane. And I remember we're at the very far end lane against the wall. In a weird way, kind of gave me some comfort, because, you know, it kind of secluded us off, and I didn't want everybody to see me not being able to shoot, right? Considering this is my first time shooting, so I wouldn't know what I was doing. I'm pretty sure I was gonna suck. And I did. And I remember my friend going through this very surface level explanation about how the gun functions, how the gun runs, how to hold it, and what to do, and so forth and so on. He shot it. My friend is not an expert marksman. He's not even a hardcore gun guy. He just was a guy that had a gun and went to a gun range. And I remember it was a Taurus Millennium. And it was this two-tone Taurus Millennium. And I still have the gun to this day. He actually gifted it to me, some time ago. And I remember picking up the gun. It was chambered in .40 Smith & Wesson. I remember picking up the gun, lining up the sights the way he taught me. And I remember the first pull of that trigger. Bang! And it terrified me. It was so startling. I don't care how many videos you watch. I don't care how many times people explain it to you. You do not truly understand what it's like to shoot a full-powered gun. And when I say full-powered, meaning that, like, not like a 22 or like a PCC, but like a handgun chambered in a 9mm or a 40 or 45. You don't truly grasp what that sensation is like until you do it yourself for the first time. And no explanation can really prepare you for it. And I remember this overwhelming sense of fear. You just don't know what just happened. You just felt the gun explode and you think, I lost a finger, I got hit. You don't know what's going on. So then after my brain recalibrated and I understood that I was still alive, that I didn't die, I recalibrated my brain. My brain got recalibrated. And so at that point, I said, okay, I'm going to shoot this again, because I had no choice. Because what I was going to do, shoot the gun once and be like, oh, I'm too scared to put the gun down. And then my friend's going to look at me and be like, you're a little bitch. So I said, I'm going to shoot this gun again. And this time I was prepared for it. So the first shot terrified me. The second shot, I fell in love. Instantly. I've never felt a sensation like this ever in my life. It was something, I've never been this passionate about something that instantaneous. The only thing I can think of is basketball. Even my car enthusiasm definitely was kind of a gradual growth. But the gun thing, that changed my life in an instant. And man, I followed that rabbit all the way down that damn hole. I followed that rabbit from, I went and watched every possible, and I got lucky. I got lucky because this all happened during a time where YouTube was still the wild, wild west, where you can go and watch all types of gun content. And there were already people in the space who were big time. And I remember I watched every freaking video I could possibly watch on guns and firearms, read every magazine. I started going to every gun shop in the Houston area I could possibly go to. And I would spend hours there. And I loved it. It was a place of peace and calm for me, especially because during the time I was dealing with my own issues. There were things going on in my life that were really hard for me, and this was a beautiful escape because I just naturally was drawn to it. And so I'm going to every gun shop. I'm watching every video. You name it. Now, I think I watched so many gun videos that I really believe I got to the end of the GunTube side of YouTube. And it was at that point that I told myself, well, I think I might want to start making my own videos. And a lot of it really boiled down to, I just wanted to make the videos I wanted to watch. And this is no spite on any of the other content creators that were out there before me. It was just, I watched their videos and I enjoyed them, but I wanted to see guns in the manner in which I saw them, which were, one, tools for defense, but then also mechanical works of art. So what I did was, and at the time, I was a big car guy at the time, and I was a big consumer of Top Gear. And I've always been one who I love aesthetics. I love beauty. I like pretty looking things. And I said, I want to bring Top Gun I want to bring Top Gear to the gun world. The best way that I can, the best way I know how. But the problem was, I didn't know the first thing about filming video. I didn't know the first thing about editing videos. I didn't know shit. So the first thing I did was I jumped back on YouTube University. I got on YouTube University and I started learning. I learned how to edit. I learned how to use Final Cut Pro. I started learning about DSLR cameras, and that was kind of like at the beginning stages of DSLR cameras at the time where they were really starting to get popular. And so I was learning about DSLR cameras, and at the time Canon was running the game. And I remember at that time I was thinking to myself, man, I got to get me one of these cameras, but I couldn't afford them at the time. But I had a good friend of mine who he was a videographer and a photographer. That's what he did for his work. And so I called him up and I said, hey, do you mind if I kind of come to your house and use your camera equipment to do these videos on some of the guns that I bought? Because at that time period, I don't know where the money came from, but I bought, because I was broke, but I wasn't broke, but I was broke, but not broke enough to not be able to afford to buy guns. I don't understand it. I don't remember it, whatever. But I remember asking him and I said, can I film in your place I was doing tabletop reviews and stuff. And he was like, yeah, that's cool. So we did a whole setup. He set up the lights the way he knew how to do it. And he was still learning himself, but he was definitely further along than I was in terms of production and video quality and all that crap. And then the funny thing is, if you go back far enough to some of my old videos, you'll be able to see, you'll be able to hear in the background while I'm filming some of those videos, some of the tabletop videos. Because I was just showing my hands because I was scared to show my face. I didn't want to show my face, right? I'm a very private person inherently. And so the idea of putting my face out there was kind of like, no, I'm just going to show my hands. And to be honest with you, a lot of the content creators at the time were doing that. You would do a tabletop review and you just see your hands. That's it. And you could even see in some of the older videos, you would hear in the background like dishes and water going off in the sink because his wife was washing the dishes in the kitchen right where I was filming the video. And then I couldn't look at her in her house and be like, hey, can you keep it down over there? So I just kind of had to deal with it. And so I started there. And then at a certain point I said, all right, I can't just keep intruding on this man's house. I got to get a camera of my own and start filming on my own. And so that's what I did. I went on Craigslist and I saw some guy selling a camera, T3, I think it was a T2i. And I remember him. It was me and my girlfriend at the time. We had met at a Chili's to go and buy this camera. So we sitting at the Chili's at the table. You thought we were selling drugs or something. So we sit at the table and he's like, you got the money? I was like, yeah, I got the money. And so I gave him the cash and then he gave me the camera. And I remember that day, I don't know why, but I was so excited. I was so excited because I was now free. I was independent. Now I didn't have to worry about shooting videos on my friend's schedule and time or intruding on his home. I can now go out in the world with I could do whatever the fuck I wanted. I learned everything I needed to learn about that camera. I learned everything I could possibly learn about editing and producing and filming. And it was just, I went down this rabbit hole of not just guns, but then production. And I'll never forget that day, because that was the day that I truly became a YouTuber. Even though I had done videos before, but that was the day where I was like, I am a YouTuber because I can do this on my own now. So I started making videos. That's what I did. I started doing tabletop videos. The problem is I started running out of guns because remember, I didn't have that much money, so I couldn't afford all these guns. So I said, okay, I had an idea. I was like, what I could do, I got this small channel, it's starting to grow. And I said, I'm gonna go to every gun shop I could possibly go to. And I'm gonna ask them and say, hey, can I film your guns? Now, I don't understand the business of gun shops and whatnot. Like, I knew they weren't gonna let me shoot them, but I thought I can do a tabletop review because that's what I was mainly doing with tabletop reviews. And at that point, I started going to different gun stores, and they were pretty much, they were all nice and respectful, but like there's an undertone of get the fuck out of here. No, we don't know you. You got this little tiny ass channel. What does it do for me, right? And then I started thinking, I was like, okay, well, I could do these videos, and then I could say where I got them from. I got them at Collector's Firearms, or I forgot the Fountain's Firearms, which is no longer there out where it used to be. And it's funny because during that time, you could do that. You can't do that now on YouTube. You do a video and you say, I got it from this gun store, they'll at best, they'll demonetize the video. At worst, you'll get a strike. So you can't even do that anymore. But back then, I could put a gun up and say, I got this gun. I was gonna pull up a gun that's under embargo. I can't really show y'all that right now. So this gun, it's like, I got this gun at this store, such and such and such, right? Hell, I might not be able to say the gun stores that I said earlier, but whatever. So I tried to sell it that way, and they were like, nah, your following's not that big. And then the whole idea of like influencers and the internet and social media and YouTube being used to create awareness about your brand, about your store, whatever it may be, that wasn't really a thing. Like, people didn't, especially in the gun world. The gun world's always kind of like 10 years behind when it comes to marketing and commerce and all stuff like that. That's not a jab. That's just kind of what it is. We're kind of forced to be 10 years behind because of all the regulations and limitations that are placed on the gun industry. So we don't have the ability to take advantage of some of the things that other areas of interest are able to. So I was getting a lot of no's until I came by one gun store. It was Defensive and Concealed Firearms. I always thought that was a really funny, weird kind of name. I always thought it wasn't a really good name. And there was a guy there by the name of Jaime. And he was the owner, not the guy there, he was the owner of the store. And I remember walking in one day, and it was a small gun store, and he had just kind of really opened it. And I remember I spoke with Jaime, and I said, I went in there and I kind of just started talking to him. And I was like, hey, I have this small YouTube channel. Could I use some of your guns, do videos on them, and then I'll tell people where I got the guns from? And Jaime said yes. And that was the second part of what I would like to say my career in this space really started. I owe so much to Jaime because he accepted me and he accepted me and welcomed me with open arms. Like, he didn't know who the hell I was. I was a nobody. Yeah, I had a YouTube channel growth, and he did get some benefit from me exposing the gun store, but for the most part, he went above and beyond to kind of help me do what I did. Like, he taught concealed carry classes in the back of his store. So there was like a classroom there, and he let me utilize that space to create the videos. And so I'd go there and I'd be there for hours just shooting the shit. You meet people in this world sometimes, and they really, really do help you out in a way that you can never really pay them back for. And Jaime did that for me. And I just remember the times and the stuff that I was going through at that time. And that place became an escape. And so I'd be back there for hours just going through guns and learning about the guns, and then doing videos, learning about the video process. And I'll never forget it. Never forget it. I bought my very first rifle from there. I bought this Arsenal SGL 51. I think it was 51 or 21. AK from there. I remember I kind of had it on layaway, honestly. I had it on layaway and I made payments and finally was able to buy it. And so I was doing so much there, but I had to expand beyond just the tabletop stuff. So I started doing shooting videos. Now, the problem with doing shooting videos is I was just one person. I didn't have anybody to film the shooting videos for me. So I had to learn how to shoot my own shooting videos, which is, you get the tripod and you get the camera, but then you had to the amount of minuscule detail that goes into filming is just insane. But there was something fun about it because I could just throw myself into it. So I'd get out there with the camera and I would just start filming, and then shit would be out of focus. So I had to make sure it was in focus, and then I would run back, grab the gun, get the shots, and then, do all those things. And then I would try to do the pan with my hand because I couldn't afford a fancy slider. And so it would be all shaky and shit. But, got the point done. And then I didn't understand how slow motion worked with high frame rate and whatnot. And so it'd be slow motion. But go look at some of my first videos. You'll see it. It'd just be slow, but it'd be slow-mo, but it'd be kind of shaky. And I'm trying to mimic the stuff that I would see on Top Gear to the best of my ability. And so I wanted things to be sexy. I wanted it to feel cinematic. But the one thing I did know how to do was write. I've always been a good writer. And I've always been good at delivering the writing, because when I was in law school, especially when we were doing mock trial programs and stuff like that, I always was the guy who opened. I did the opens because I was good at storytelling. I was the person who was good at communicating and bringing you and ensnaring you into whatever situation that I was discussing. And I took my ability to write, my colorful way of writing, which is ironic because in law school, the way I wrote wasn't really conducive to legal writing. Legal writing is very structured, overtly structured. And my brain doesn't go A, B, C, D. Even though I'm very logical, my brain goes A, C, D, R, comes back around and then puts things together that way, which makes for great creative style writing, but makes very methodical, structured writing really hard for me. Well, not hard. It's boring. I don't like it. So at this point, now I just realized that this video, this is probably going to be a multi-part thing because there's so many aspects. Right now, I'm telling you the very genesis of how I got into guns. So at this point, I started writing and scripting my videos and then delivering them over voiceover, because that's what Top Gear did. Jeremy Clarkson used the big booming voice, the Porsche 911. It makes you feel like you're in a Power Ranger. Yeah, I remember actually the Aston Martin DBS. I remember he's like, and then there's the gear lever, which looks like a Power Ranger's leg. I wanted to recreate that because as much as I was into cars, I couldn't afford them. So I couldn't do that with cars, but I could do that with guns. And so that's what I did. And so I would write to start with, I would go out and I would shoot the gun, learn about the gun, feel the gun, and then talk about the shooting experience. I love communicating the experience. I wasn't really data driven to that degree. I'm not a nerd when it comes to guns. I'm about the experience. I'm the same way with cars. What is the experience? I need to learn. I know enough data points and about the gun from a finite information standpoint where I can be dangerous. However, I'm not a geek. I'm not a geek in that sense. And so what I wanted to do is communicate that feeling, because that's what happened to me. That's how I got into guns. That second shot is where I fell in love. And so I think I've been trying to communicate that feeling with all of my gun reviews up until this very day, because that's how impactful that experience was for me. So I started doing that and creating these videos. And at the time, nobody was really doing that. Nobody was trying to make cinematic gun videos because it was hard and because it just wasn't what people were doing. And so my videos kind of started standing out in that perspective because they just felt and looked different, and I approached them differently. And the channel started to grow. And as the channel started to grow, I started getting more attention, and I started to do more videos, and then my writing started to improve even more. And then my filming and videography, it just all started to kind of grow and become its own thing. And I really, really enjoyed it. I really enjoy that process, that creative process of sitting down, like spending time with the gun, then sitting down and trying to write and communicate the feeling that gun gave me when I was shooting it. And then on top of that, then finding out clever ways to edit the video, because I'm doing all of it. I was filming them, writing the script, delivering the script, editing the videos, and then putting it out there. Like, man, this is full-time job shit. I'm like, God damn, this is a lot. But it didn't feel like a lot at the time because I was having so much fun, and it was my escape. And I was doing that with just the gun stuff. A lot of people don't realize, like, I wasn't doing anything political. Everything was just guns. It was gun culture. That was the thing I was into. And I didn't really get into the political side of things until we started getting these mass shootings, and all of these anti-gunners started talking about how they wanted to ban this and do that and so forth and so on. And I'm like, this is dumb. This doesn't make any sense. And I wasn't even really on the political side of it. I never looked at it from a political standpoint. I was just a guy that just loved guns. So when I got into the political side of it, now it'll have to be the part two, that's getting into how I was, with the NRA, how I started becoming basically kind of the face of the political advocacy side of the 2A space on social media. But it was the gun culture stuff, the gun reviews, the gun. The thing about it too was I had immersed myself so much into the firearm community, and I'm an introvert. So largely when I'm around a lot of people, I'm just observing. I'm just taking things in and watching how things are. And I've always been like that. Like when I was a club promoter, I can't believe I'm about to out myself right now. I think I've washed away all of the possible things. But long story short, I used to have a blog page called Yotapop. And don't ask me where that name came from. But I used to run the page called Yotapop. It was a blog. And basically, it was about my observations of the nightlife, like going to clubs and going out and so forth. Because even when I was out doing that as a promoter, I was just observing. I was just watching how shit goes down. And I love the observation. I love communicating that culture in words on the blog. At the same time, that's what I wanted to apply to the gun side too. So that's when I started coming up with the videos like the types of people that carry 9, the types of people that carry 40 and carry 45 and so forth and so on. Those are actually really fun to do and really fun to write. They just take so much time. So I was like, I'll be writing that and then something political will jump off. So I got to go turn focus to that and then go do that. But that was how I got into guns for the very, very first time. It was basically my friend asking me, hey, do you want to go to a gun range? Going there, being terrified the first time I shot, and then falling in love instantly the second time around. And I remember I'd be in class freaking out. Like I was still in law school at this time. So I remember I'd be in my law school class with my computer up and all I'm doing is looking at guns. I'm not even paying attention to what the professor's talking about. And I remember I was kind of freaking some people out because they're like, where, like, why? Like, because they didn't know me as a gun guy. Remember, I got into guns while I was in law school. So people didn't understand. They were like where's this coming from? All of a sudden, you go from just like this guy who's into cars and all this other stuff, and now all of a sudden, like you're this huge gun guy, like into guns and stuff. You're in class looking at all the gun stuff. It freaks some of the people out. Like I remember there was a time where like Instagram was just starting too. This is like at the genesis of Instagram, and it was like my girlfriend at the time was kind of like, can you, because I was posting a bunch of guns and stuff on my page, and she was like, do you think you can start a second Instagram page? Because a lot of people are getting worried. They're getting worried because you're always posting about guns and stuff like that. And they're kind of like, it's kind of making them feel weird. Well, she didn't ask me to start another page. She was just telling me, people were asking questions like, is he okay? Is he depressed? What's going on here? He's got all these guns on his page. And my firearm initiation was so innocent. I never even thought about it like that. Like the idea, like, wait, what do you mean there's something wrong with me? These are just guns. These are just a tool. They're mechanical works of art. It didn't register in my brain that people saw it as kind of scary. And being the nice guy that I am, which I decided to go ahead and start a separate Instagram page, which is my Mr. Colion Noir page now. And so I have a personal page, which I never use. It's still there, but I never use it. And don't bother trying to find it. It's private. It's not even under my name. So, but yeah, I started using that as my outlet for my gun side. And then that just started to grow. And even the Colion Noir name, right? A lot of people don't understand that that's a moniker. Like, that's not my real name, but it wasn't like I was trying to hide myself, like, because I was doing something nefarious. It was more so just like when I started my YouTube channel, I didn't want to use my real name. My real name sounded lame. So I was like, I need a cool name for this channel. And I was like, what could that be? And one of my friend who I started off filming videos at his place, he always nicknamed me Killer Colion. And so I was like, all right, cool. I'm gonna call myself Colion. And it's very close to what my real name is. You can find my real name. I'm just not gonna give it here. And I was like, okay, now I need a last name. I need a cool sounding last name. And as you all can probably figure out by now, I love the color black. It is my favorite color. I've tried over and over and over again to try different colors. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Which is funny though, because in college, I was a pretty boy in college. So I was a guy who'd wear like bright, colorful polos and shit like that. And then something happened. I just became emo and goth all of a sudden after college. And then everything I just wore was black. So considering that, I just lost my train of thought. As far as me coming up with my last name, I said, okay, I love the color black, but I'm not going to call myself Colion Black. It just kind of felt flat. So I said, I got it. I'm going to call myself Colion Noir. I had this favorite cologne at the time that I really liked, Dracar Noir. And I always thought that noir, that just sat perfect, especially when I found out what noir meant, which was French for black. So I was like, perfect. Dracar Noir. That was the cologne. So I said, Colion Noir. Now that's my name. So that's where the whole name Colion Noir came from. And I started off with Mr. Colion Noir because I'm an arrogant son of a bitch. Also, my subset was Mr. Colion Noir, the urban gun enthusiast. I called myself the urban gun enthusiast, and everybody thought I was calling myself the urban gun enthusiast because I was black. Had nothing to do with my race. I called myself the urban gun enthusiast because I love the city. I love living in the city. And at the time, if you were into firearms, everything was about being out in nature. You grew up in the country, you lived off and had a bunch of land or something like that, and you didn't live in the city. There was no two-way city culture, not that I was aware of at the time. So that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be the content creator that looked at guns from the perspective of living in an urban environment, i.e. major metropolitan city area, and who was also a gun enthusiast, and basically destroyed the notion that being a gun enthusiast didn't mean you grew up in the country in the backwoods somewhere. You could grow up in the heart of downtown Houston and still be a gun enthusiast, because at the time, most people weren't really talking out loud about being enthusiasts living in the city. People just look at you weird. But that's how that all came about. And so in part 2, which things start getting real interesting, because at this point, my channel I'm just known in the gun space, right? That's just me. I'm in the gun space. When I started delving into the political world is where things started getting interesting and where my life really started to change. And that'll be a part 2 episode. But I just want to start by want to do this to kind of talk to you guys about how I first got into firearms. One, as a way to really kind of demonstrate for people out there who are wondering and people who want to know, like, how can they get started? I mean, truth be told, just do it. There's just no other way. You're going to overanalyze to death. You're going to get paralysis by analysis. Just go out and do it. That's what I did. I'm a quick starter, though. So some people have that personality. They get an idea and they go. Other people, they like to mull over it and then finally do it. I'm like, I get the idea. All right, let's do it. Let's execute this shit right now. And that's how I am and how I've always been. So that's going to be it for this episode of the Colion Noir Podcast. As I said before, we have some more guests that are going to be doing some podcasts with me. Some interesting ones. Some of them probably going to make you mad. Some of them are going to make you happy. Hey, that's just what it is. Like I said, I use you guys as therapy for this, but I do plan on really expanding on this podcast because I think that we can do some real cool things with it. So that's it for this episode of the Colion Noir Podcast.